President Trump is endorsing Darlene Graham to replace her late brother, Lindsey Graham. She faces, though, a crowded field of candidates, making it unlikely that anyone will get the majority needed to avoid a runoff. CNN political commentator and former South Carolina State Representative Bakari Sellers joins us now, along with Caton Dawson, Republican strategist, former chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party. Caton, I just want to start with you. How important is this special election for President Trump and his reputation, again, within the Republican Party in terms of influence?
Well, first, it's a privilege and pleasure to be on with you, Barack, and yourself today. Let me explain to you, these primaries in South Carolina are different. I don't know how important it is for Trump. He might or might not be on the ballot in 2028, so it probably is not that important. Again, we've got
constitutionally he won't, but yes, go ahead.
That's exactly right. That's a whole nother conversation. But at the moment, right now, you've got Darlene Graham, who's Lindsey's little sister, never been on the ballot. You got Mark Sanford, who's been on the ballot 21 times and won 20 of them. You've got two congressmen and Ralph Norman. So we'll see. About 330,000 people are going to show up to vote. That is less than 10% of the people available to vote. So these primaries all over the country are really different. One of the things I saw earlier on your shows that I make a comment on is, and I think certainly Representative Sellers will agree with me, is primaries that I've seen all over the country, they really don't vote for who the best person is to win. They vote for their hopes and their fears and their personal ambitions, not to take a look and say, wow, I got the best candidate. That's happening in Minnesota, happening in Wisconsin, happening in Michigan. The gift that keeps on giving Republicans right now is we're at a midterms where we ought to get wiped out in a 50-50 country. People don't like Donald Trump on the other side. And the Democrats, unbeknownst to us, have given us something called the Democrat Socialist Progressive Party that's not going to sell in November in a lot of these places.
Well, Bakari, so let's talk about that because one, I just want to know what Democrats hope will happen in this special election in South Carolina. But how do you see the primary picture for Democrats in races across the country versus, actually stacking up legitimate chances, whether in Michigan or Wisconsin or whatever, to actually gain those seats against a Republican?
So first, let's look at South Carolina. I mean, the fact is, I believe Donald Trump's probably going to go 0 for 3 here in South Carolina, which is still a very ruby red state. And when I say 0 for 3, I mean he lost Pamela Evette, who was his horse to be the governor of the state. He lost the redistricting battle, which made him 0 for 2. And I'm not sure Darlene Graham's going to get over this hump. I mean, I'm with Caton on this, that the individual who was the dark horse in this race is Mark Sanford. Mark Sanford is an interesting candidate, but he is by far the most conservative of the individuals running and has a track record to show for it, regardless of his indiscretion 17 years ago. And so South Carolina is going to do what South Carolina does. Darlene Graham will make it out on Tuesday, but I don't think she gets over the hump. As far as what Democrats are doing around the country, the fact is we have to do a better job of electing good candidates who can win in November. For a long period of time, I looked at Republicans like Todd Akin in Missouri or Catherine O'Donnell, I think was her name, who I was not a witch in Delaware, who Chris Coons had an opportunity to beat. And Republicans kept giving us a gift. What we have to do when you look at someone like Francesca Hong in Wisconsin is we have to elect candidates who actually represent the larger swath of voters in the country, not just people who espouse ideas which are really indefensible when you come to the month of November.
Do you think just to follow up there, do you think if Hong, I mean, she polling right now as the front runner, we'll see what happens. If she gets that nomination and moves forward, does that make the job of Democrats more or less difficult in Wisconsin to keep that governor's seat?
No, you take Wisconsin off the map. I mean, to be completely honest, and you shift resources. I mean, I'm tired of people not having honest conversations about the political map. I mean, look, we need to be investing in Sherrod Brown. We need to be investing in places like Roy Cooper in North Carolina. Even if you want to take a swing at something, go to Texas, invest there. But let's not spend time and waste energy for individuals who are so far. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and defend with you, Omar, whether or not Thanksgiving should be canceled. That ain't on my like list of things to do on this Sunday afternoon. I'm not going to sit here and defund the police. I'm just not going to do that. And many people who are in the heart of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or even in the rural areas aren't going to do the same. And so, unfortunately, we missed an opportunity to do what we need to do. But look, I think that there are enough places around the country that we can actually pick up some seats. I'm looking at Maine as well.
And Caton, I want to talk about Michigan a little bit here too, because